This is the Unspoken Podcast on the Undetermined Podcast Network.
You are listening to the Unspoken Podcast, part of the Undetermined Podcast Network. It is episode number 15. I'm Tom Aldano, along with Nick Federa, as always.
And we got an episode jam-packed with stuff to talk about. So strap yourselves in, folks. It's gonna be a barn burner.
Yes, indeed. And Nick, I would like to open this episode. Well, if we were a video podcast, I would have loved to open this episode with a video tribute with what's it called, "Candle in the Wind" by Elton John playing as we watch the lowlights and highlights of Tony Romo's career.
Yeah, or you could call it "Requiem for a Broken Spine."
And of course, that is the top story in sports this week. Tony Romo saying goodbye to football after 13 seasons?
Yeah, I didn't even realize it had been that long. It's like, God, we're getting old.
Yeah, I remember high school and college, it was always just fuck Romo, fuck Romo, fuck Romo. And now it's like, oh, no more Romo to fuck.
Then again, now, although I've been guilty of this, well, first of all, he signed a deal to take over Phil Simms' spot on CBS, and they are really, if you'll excuse the term, pimping him out. They are giving him the big games. They're giving him Sunday afternoon games, I think, and they are tossing him into the deep end broadcast-wise to see if he'll sink or swim. Yeah.
And actually, that has caused a bit of a controversy. The son, I believe it was the son of Phil Simms, Chris Simms, coming out and saying, they pretty much, that they screwed Phil Simms over, but it was like, it seems like the way that Romo replaced Phil, something about it, and he assumed that Jim Nantz had signed off on it. Here's the quote. "You can't sit there as a normal person who's evaluated this and seen it happen before and go, they handled it like professionals. It's been out there rumored for 2 weeks. I had to tell my dad first before CBS or anybody because I found out from an NFL insider. I forwarded the text messages I was sent, and basically it said, hey, listen, sorry to be the bearer of bad news, but Romo's being offered your dad's job on CBS. That sucks, and I'm sorry. And my dad was in Barbados, and I had to forward the text message to him to let him know. I don't think he feels like they talked to him right away. I at least warned him to let him know what was happening. I mean, that's just not what you do to a good, hardworking employee for 20 years.
Yeah.
Now, let's take this with a grain of salt. Of course, this is the son of Phil Simms. But if this is true, then I will have to agree with Chris. No matter what you think of Phil Simms, that is kind of unprofessional in a way.
Yeah, especially seeing he's, like you said, like the quote said, he's been in the broadcast booth for 20 years. I mean, you can't, you're just going to toss him aside for somebody who had no broadcast experience? And we have, then again, with with ex-players, I should say, calling games, they're kind of hit or miss. Because for every Strahan, you get Kiki Barber going, well, what they need to do is execute and execute and execute and execute. Yes, we'll file that under no shit. Are we expecting Jim Nantz to do all the heavy lifting with this? Because
I don't know. I mean, this is going to be. Does Tony Romo even have like a communications or a journalism degree? I don't think so.
Well, they just hand those out to anybody. It's like,
I know.
Yeah, we're working our asses off, and he gets a plum gig at CBS. It's like, what the hell?
Well, it's like I understand if it's one or two, like if it's a broadcast booth of 3 people. I understand if one of the color commentators is an ex-player, because that's insight, nobody else can really get. And I mean, I also like it when I like it how the NBA on TNT does it, I think, because don't they have like Ernie in the studio?
Yeah, they have him in the studio to provide color. That's exactly it. Detail. Not exactly the heavy lifting, play-by-play analysis, but
Right.
It's kind of been Monday night, because Monday Night Football, when it first started, because you remember the part in the book when they were talking about putting Don Meredith in the booth with Howard Cosell?
Yep. Context
Yeah.
for those who don't know, we read a book for a class last semester. It was a book about Howard Cosell.
And basically, Howard Cosell was reticent about letting Don Meredith in the booth with him for Monday Night Football, or what would become Monday Night Football, because he was afraid that he wouldn't bring anything, to the table that was insightful or even, coherent at some point. I mean, well, then again, it's Howard Cosell, so he'd be reticent to share the spotlight with anybody who wasn't named Howard Cosell. So,
right.
Yeah, but the thing is here, it just seems like a "what the hell are you doing" move.
I just find it very weird. Like, Romo retired, and it seemed like right away he was given the position. Usually retired players tend to, stay out of the spotlight for a little bit.
Yeah, at least I would have at least given him 6 months.
Yeah, I would have waited till, preseason.
But is this, I wonder if this is like a Tebow move where he's technically taking this job, although he's not technically retired.
That's always a distinct possibility. And speaking of which, it's going to be a perfect transition to what we're going to talk about next. But, before we get to that story, I just want to say, like I was going back to before, I feel like, NBA on TNT gets it right when it comes to using former players, because they have Ernie in the studio, and beside him are Shaq, Barkley, and all the rest of the former players doing their own color inside of a studio, but not at the game itself, where you would normally see Marv Albert.
Yeah. And
I feel like...
Yeah, you need to have these guys that have innate knowledge of not only broadcasting, but not of the game, but of broadcasting, how to call a game, and how to do what the two of us are studying to do. Right.
It helps. It helps if the athlete has a degree in communication journalism. I know somebody from my undergrad who, his name is Jason Thompson. He played in the NBA since about 2008. He was the 12th overall pick. Played around on a few teams. He was on the Sacramento Kings for a long time. So, unfortunately, he didn't have the best career because they kept changing head coaches. Let's just go back to the rant that I said on the Sacramento Kings all those weeks ago. Listen in on that if you want my opinion on the Sacramento Kings. But, yeah, basically he's now playing overseas. But he has often said in publications and such for my undergrad that he studied communication journalism, has a bachelor's degree, because he wants to make the transition. And I feel like that helps if you have the degree and you study. Because, it even helps during your playing days, because then you understand the media. We talked last week in one of our classes, we talked with ESPN's Rich Cimini, and we discussed that not all athletes understand the media.
Yeah, and he was quite insistent on that point, actually. And he's a person who deals with it every day.
Mm-hmm.
So you would expect him to know about these things. But I just keep wondering, the question that I keep coming back to is, right, is CBS paying him more money to be an analyst than he would have gotten, say, playing with the Texans? Because last I heard that they were the ones that were seriously interested in him.
That's what I heard too, but I didn't hear for how much. I guess that would have depended on the team Romo went to.
His pickings might have been slim,
Right. So, maybe not. I don't know. It depends on the team. For instance, if it was going to be Houston Texans, Houston's a big city, so that's a 50-50, I'd say. Cleveland Browns, hell no.
No, nobody wants that. Not even people who live in Cleveland want that.
Nobody likes the Cleveland Browns. Not even the Cleveland Browns like the Cleveland Browns.
Exactly.
But also it goes back to the other thing about CBS is, like we discussed, if what Chris Sims says is true, I'm taking it with a grain of salt only because it's the son of Bill Sims. So you never know there. I mean, I don't doubt that he could be accurate. I think he could. The story has, it probably is true, but I can't say for certain because there's still part of me that's still, it's the journalist in me. It's like you don't know for certain. You don't know which side of the story is right.
To approach it with a skeptical eye.
Right.
But, I'm no fan, of Phil Simms, the broadcaster. I've had my issues with Phil in the past.
You know him personally?
Yeah, even though I wasn't actually, old enough to ever watch him play for the Giants. I'm sure if I had, me being a Giants fan, I probably would have worshipped the ground he walks on. But, however, it still is a dick move by CBS. Let's call a spade here.
Right.
But,
No, I was just saying if what Chris Sims says is true, coming from a skeptical eye.
Yeah, but I guess, you know what, the only thing that we can do at this point is just wait and see what happens.
Yeah, there were a lot of people skeptical when, what's it called? What's his face? A-Rod took over at Fox Sports. And he just got praises around the board for how well of an analyst he is.
Could be. We will see.
That's the thing. What's it called? Last postseason. I think last postseason they had a table of it was A-Rod and Pete Rose and I think Barry Bonds too.
Frank Thomas.
Oh, Frank Thomas. And while they're all athletes, I feel like they all spent enough time learning and stuff to know, how to be analysts and at the very least be entertaining and provide some entertainment while they're they're doing their analysis.
Yeah. Well, speaking of retired players coming out of nowhere, let's talk about Marshawn Lynch, shall we?
Yes, so on Wednesday, it was announced, I believe I posted on this on our Facebook and Twitter, I believe it was Ian Rappaport, reported that Marshawn Lynch has told the Oakland Raiders he intends to come out of retirement. His one-season retirement will end, and he intends to try to come play for Oakland. Now, there are some little obstacles, although they're little obstacles. That being that technically the Seattle Seahawks still own Lynch's contract. He will either need to be released or traded before this move can be official. And, of course, he has to sign those, the unretirement papers or whatever.
Yeah. But if I'm the Seahawks, I wouldn't do so because with everything they're going through recently, shopping Richard Sherman around, it definitely seems like it seems like I would say you're not going to the fucking Raiders.
And yet supposedly everybody's expecting some smooth transition. Some context. The Raiders, Marshawn Lynch has come out and said that the Raiders are the only team he will come out and retire for. They are, of course, in Oakland for now. Marshawn Lynch is a California boy.
Yeah, they'll be moving to Vegas soon, though, so maybe he's in on that sweet, sweet gambling action.
Or maybe he's trying to take in the last seasons in Oakland from a different perspective. You never know.
Yeah, could be. Could be. Is this because he'll still have to work? I'm just wondering if this is going to be his version of a cushy gig. Kind of like not on the same level, but kind of like what we were talking about a couple weeks ago with Manny signing with the Japanese.
Oh yeah, signing with Japan.
Yeah.
I don't know. All I know is I don't want this to become a Brett Favre thing, because for some reason I could see over the next couple of months this turning into a Brett Favre thing where it's like, I'm retired, I'm not retired, I'm retired, I'm not retired.
Yeah, with a dick pic shoved in there for good measure.
Oh my God.
Oh God. Expression.
But yeah, and there's another thing we got to talk about with Lynch coming out of retirement. Let's face it, he has been out of the league for a season. And his last season, didn't he miss like 9 games or something like that?
Yeah, because he had been injured.
So I don't know truthfully if his body can hold up to an NFL career, like the NFL lifestyle anymore.
Yeah, and the league.
And even if he does, there's got to be a lot of rust on his body.
Yeah, and the league, not to mention the league, changes at light speed, where a team can be looking one way to one season, then the next season they're looking completely different.
Right.
And because there's such high turnover in a lot of the teams in the league, you're subjected to a radical restructuring of divisions even on a year by year basis. And I'm just wondering if he's up to that.
I mean, here's the thing. If the Raiders stay how they were from last season, if Derek Carr does not get injured, and Lynch comes back into the league, and let's say he has a successful comeback, I think it'd be a really good season for the Raiders. Maybe past the first round. Maybe they'll get to the second round. Maybe even the conference championship. You never know.
It could be. Who knows? I mean, I don't doubt for a second that Lynch is a gamer. I mean, he'll show up to play. I'm sure of that.
Right. I feel like that's one of the things. I feel like Lynch, I think, is struggling to stay away from the game, which isn't uncommon for retired players.
And yeah, you spend most of your life from the time you were a little kid training to be football, but then, you leave the game behind. You don't know how to do anything else. You don't know what to do with yourself. I mean, you do. It's understandable. I mean,
which actually can connect to our last topic. Is these old players will go into the broadcasting to try to stay in the game.
To try at least stay at arm's length so they can at least watch football and have an impact on the game, at least from a media perspective, because media has an impact on football. I mean, it has an impact on all sports. It's not just sitting there and telling us what happened. It's the media's relationship with sports is symbiotic, and one affects the other.
Right.
So even if you're in the broadcast booth, you do have a connection to the game itself.
And you got to talk about all the plays and such. I remember doing a research thing on old broadcasters, or broadcasters like you need to hear before you die or something like that. And for John Madden, I was doing some research on Madden, and there was this Bleacher Report article. And it had this quote. It was like about how before Madden, color commentary was just telling stories. Enter Madden with his little drawing board, his Telestrator, and then the game changed because he had a former player and a coach in there. With a Telestrator, he was able to analyze all the plays. He was able to show what was right, what was wrong, how did one team take advantage of the other team. Essentially, John Madden changed the game of color commentary.
And like you said, it does. Like I said, it does have an effect.
Mm-hmm.
One does have an effect on the other.
And I mean, I guess Marshawn Lynch didn't want to go into color commentary. He wanted to be in football. He wants to be on the field, which is kind of ironic considering all the former players that have come out and said, I never would play football for as long as I did had I known about the impacts of like concussions and stuff like that. So I just find that kind of really ironic. But I mean, some players just can't stay away from the game. So the question is, how long before this Lynch move, Lynch comes out of retirement and everything is official? And can he hold up to the standards, hold up to what he used to be? Oh, by the way, Marshawn Lynch dropped a little hint today about that move being official. If you look on, actually I didn't know, this was on Thursday, I believe. If you look on his website, his web store, there are these shirts you can buy, and on it says Beast Mode in Oakland.
Is that so?
Yes. But now, actually, let me try to bring that up. But now another thought has entered my mind. What if Marshawn Lynch is about just being the biggest troll in all of trolling?
You know, him being him, I would not put it past him for a second now that I think about it. Because if there's one thing that man has thrived on, I mean, especially with his years in Seattle, he was great at playing the media and the fans like fiddles.
He was
For a
also
guy who doesn't talk, who does not like to talk, he definitely said a lot with a little.
Yeah, absolutely. Let me try to... here it is. Okay, so let me see if I can get the photo up. Let me show you, Nick. You see all the jerseys? There it is, Beast Road in Oakland.
Oh, boy. Hintity, hint, hint.
Yeah, exactly. Big hint, hint. So, before we move on to our next topic, any final words?
The same thing with Romo that we'll have to do with Marshawn Lynch is we'll wait and see how it happens. It's definitely going to be interesting watching, but you know, I can't make any predictions from on high because I really don't see the logic behind this, and so I'm just going to have to just sit back and watch it.
I agree. Before we move on, there's a couple more headlines. We're not going to really discuss them. I'll just read them off. Aaron Rodgers and Olivia Munn have officially broken up, Nick.
And everybody in Wisconsin rejoiced for some reason. I don't understand why you were blaming his struggles on her. Granted, Olivia Munn, I've been watching.
How about he goes and talks to his parents again? How about that?
Yeah. Let's start with that. I mean, granted, I'm a fan of Olivia Munn because I'm a nerd and I've been watching her since I was 7 when she was on G4 on Attack of the Show. So
I remember that.
So, to be honest with you, you hate to see it.
I know.
Ben, but I just don't understand why these asswipe pundits were blaming everything that was.
I know.
Struggles and
even then, that's just off the field shit. I mean, on the field, I think he's still a hell of a quarterback. He still made it to the conference championship game.
He's twice a quarterback that most quarterbacks in the league are.
Richard Sherman has said he is involved in trade talks, but he will only accept a move to a contender, which means he's probably not going to get moved to a contender.
Oh boy.
He's the best corner in the game. Will you try him with a sorry receiver like Crabtree?
Oh boy, that is going to be fun. Is it futile to dream that he might be traded to the Giants?
Oh my God! If he was, that'd be something. A report is in a few minutes ago, Nick. San Francisco 49ers cornerback Tremaine Brock has been arrested following a domestic incident.
Oh, well, I can't say I'm surprised because, another domestic incident.
Bye, Brock.
So, let me guess. 1 game suspension, 2 game suspension.
Probably.
Quarter suspension, light slap on the wrist, maybe.
It does not say any more other than he was just arrested. That was it. It was only 20 minutes ago from my phone, from where I read it, so... we'll have to wait on the details of that.
Yeah.
There is an opinion piece about Sherman, and it might be necessary for the Seahawks to avoid salary cap woes. Tom Brady stole a 2015 Super Bowl jersey to be displayed in the Patriots Hall of Fame.
Of course. Because
why not throw the 2017 one there, too, just for shits and giggles?
Yeah, just for shits and giggles. But I have a feeling that coming from a baseball fandom with the Yankees where everything is preserved. I can't say I don't understand it because I do.
Right.
But I got a feeling that it's gotten so much out of hand with this guy that if he sneezed...
They had to call the fucking FBI into this.
Yeah, if he sneezed onto a Kleenex, they would gild that Kleenex and put it behind 3 inches of bulletproof glass.
Probably. And last but not least, Ben Roethlisberger has just confirmed he will return for the 2017 season.
Hey, you want to get sacked more?
Initial take?
Hey, okay. All right. Hoping you can get the punishment there, Ben.
All right. You are listening to the Unspoken Podcast, part of the Undetermined Podcast Network. Nick, let us move on to baseball. But before we get into baseball, on the field stuff, let's talk about cheating for a bit. Derek Jeter, my favorite athlete of all time, one of the men I have strived to be like for all my life. And he is possibly looking into being a team owner, but not for the Yankees.
For the Marlins. He is interested in, since Loria is shopping the Marlins around, he is interested in becoming part of a group that will place a bid to buy the Florida Marlins. And granted, the man is basically God to me because he was the one who taught me to love baseball and the Yankees.
Yep,
but
same.
You know what? Go ahead. You know what? He's made enough money. I honestly would be very interested to see what he would do as an owner.
I would hope he would be able to turn that team around. I mean, Jesus Christ, I'm looking at this from the perspective not so much of Jeter beating the Marlins, but I think the Marlins need Jeter. I mean, we talked about it. We talked about this weeks ago too. How when we were doing the NL East, the Marlins are they're not a team that's like, shit.
They have pieces, but they just can't seem to put them together to build the Lego castle of greatness. It's more like Duplo blocks. It's a knockoff.
I mean, they have Giancarlo Stanton and D. Gordon, but I mean, even in their past, when you talk about the 1997 and 2003 World Series teams, we've mentioned this before, over the next couple of seasons, after those World Series winning seasons, they got rid of all the good players that helped them.
They were not able to keep that roster together. And the 2003 Marlins, as much as I fucking hate that team, was stacked. Stacked upon stacked upon stacked. You had a young Miguel Cabrera, you had Randy Johnson, you had fucking Josh Beckett. I mean,
was Randy Johnson really on the 2003 Marlins?
Oh no, wait, he wasn't.
That was the 2001 Diamondbacks.
Yeah.
Another team.
Kurt Schilling.
Kurt Schilling.
Yeah, Kurt Schilling was, and
a young Josh Beckett.
And Josh Beckett was too, I think.
Yes, it was a very young Josh Beckett, who was, I believe, the World Series MVP.
He was co-MVP with Schilling, I think.
Oh, yeah, I think that was that the series? Let me look it up. But, yeah, basically, I feel like they should consider Derek Jeter as a part owner, only because I feel like they need a new owner. They really, really need it. Once again, it's not about Jeter needing the Marlins. I think the Marlins need some new ownership. Yeah. Josh Beckett was the MVP of that season.
Was the sole MVP, or was it with
sole MVP? But basically, I mean, some new ownership would be nice around the Marlins. I think maybe he can turn that team around. Schilling wasn't on the Marlins either. That was the Diamondbacks. Oh, Johnson and Schilling were Diamondbacks MVPs in the 2001 series. That the two World Series us would like to forget.
I can't help but feel a little bit disappointed. Even though I do think that Jeter should go for it, because I'd love to see what he would do in a management position or an owning things position. I can't help but think, I would have loved him to have at least a part in managing in at least being a part of running the Yankees.
I can agree. I can agree with that, but at the same time, not every former player goes back to owning their team. I mean, look at Michael Jordan. Michael Jordan never played for the Charlotte Hornets, but he's the owner of the Charlotte Hornets because his objectives as an owner are different. He wants to, as much as he loves the Bulls, his team right now is the Hornets, and he's focused as an owner. He wants to make that franchise into something. And I feel like that's what Jeter would probably want to do. He would stick around the game. He'd still be a part of baseball, but he'd be trying to, make the Marlins into something. And if he were to do that, you could not only praise him as a player, you could praise him as an owner too.
We will see. I mean, Nolan Ryan was the president of Texas Rangers, and he was able to do some good things during his tenure. I mean, he's not. I don't think he's the president anymore, is he?
Let me see, Texas Rangers. I don't know. I want to say. Part of me wants to say yes. Part of me wants to say no. No, John Daniels is president of baseball operations now.
Yeah, and Nolan Ryan stepped down, but he was able to.
That's right.
Well, he retired.
That's right. He did step.
But he was able to do good things. So let's see if Cheats will be able to be a part of this.
I think he can. I think the potential is there. If there's one person who really knows all about the game, it's Derek Jeter. So I think he'll succeed. And I'm knocking on wood, he'll succeed.
Yeah, one thing's for sure, and I'm sure this is going to be music to the ears of Marlins fans. He'll be a hell of a better owner than Laurie.
Jeffrey Laurie. Yeah, I agree. I was just going to say that too.
Not enough that Laurie had to basically kill the Montreal Expos. He had to pretty much run the Marlins into the ground too.
Rest in peace, Montreal Expos.
Yeah, that one still hurts.
Anyways, I mean, I still like the Nationals, as you know. But, there's that history as the Expos that, truly underappreciated team. Anyways, let's get into this season of baseball. And I don't know, Nick, what do you think about the baseball season thus far from both the Yankees and Mets perspective and just in general?
Well, if I had to sum it up in one word, one affectation really, based on the first 3 games that I've seen the Yankees play, I would have to sum it up thusly. Fuck. And I'm not pushing the panic button. Let me just be entirely. Let me put that with a caveat. This is not me freaking out, but still, I must use the word fuck because everything that I've been seeing so far, I saw last season with the rotation, couldn't get it together, offense could not score runs, and the bullpen was brilliant, basically.
Opening day for the Yankees. Wow, Masahiro Tanaka shit the bed.
Yes, indeed he did.
He went 2 and 2/3. He couldn't get out of the third inning. 8 hits, 7 runs, given up, all earned runs, 3 strikeouts, 2 walks. His ERA after 1 game, a 23.63.
It might as well be a bajillion. You're gonna have to work your ass off to get that down.
Yeah, I've got a feeling he's gonna end the season with at least a 4 ERA.
Ah, Christ. That's exactly
Maybe at least a 3.5.
What did you say?
I said maybe at least a 3.5.
Maybe.
Meanwhile, the Mets are now 2-1. They took 2 out of 3 from the Braves. The Yankees right now, of course, are 1-2, only taking 1 out of 3 from the Rays. The Yankees are set to...
They're set to play a 3-game swing in Baltimore tonight with Luis Severino against Ubaldo Jimenez.
And then on Saturday, it's Tanaka and Gosman, and Sunday it's Sabathia and Wade Miley. I actually saw a thing from Joe Girardi today talking about Severino being the number 4 or 5 starter, and essentially saying, all right, Severino, the ball's in your court. You have this opportunity. Don't fuck it up.
And can we trust him to not fuck it up? I don't know yet.
I think even if he does, maybe you need to move him back to the long reliever slot. But at the very least, it's still April. It's still early in the season. After that first loss I posted on Facebook, remember, 161 games to go.
Yeah, and historically, the Yankees really haven't been. Well, I'm not going to mention words. They've sucked in April.
If I have to pull out a historical fact, I think that was the 6th or 7th straight opening day loss for the Yankees.
Yeah, the last time they actually won on opening day was in 2011.
It was either 10 or 11 where they last won, and that's sad.
That's just it's well, you know what? I just said it. They've sucked in April, so really that stat is not as surprising as it should be.
True, that's very true. And the Yankees don't really get hot till the summer months. When the weather gets hot, the Yankees get hot. That's what I say.
Here's hoping that trend keeps going, but I don't like I said, it's only 3 games, so I'm not going to push the panic button. I'm not going to be flailing around, even though you're not going to be able to actually physically see me flail. However, I don't like what I've been seeing from Gary Sanchez.
I told you. I said it before. I've got a feeling he could have a sophomore slump. I don't think he's going to hold up to the expectations of last season. I think last season was a really good year, and he was hot. But I said it. There were going to be pitchers that were going to throw him lots of curveballs. They know that he's a fastball hitter now. And now that they had some time to study him, everyone has strategies as how to approach Gary Sanchez, meaning Gary Sanchez has to take a new approach. And he hasn't had the experience to do that yet, so he's not going to have as good of a season as last season.
So, and you were absolutely right about that. You were 100% on the money so far.
That's just how it is. To the people, that's why everybody who was taking Gary Sanchez early in the fantasy baseball drafts that I was in, it's like, how? Somebody, I'm not going to name names, took Sanchez before Edwin Encarnacion. I'm sorry. And that allowed me to grab Encarnacion. So it's like, thank you, but really?
Their loss is your game.
Right. How? I just don't understand. We're talking from a fantasy perspective, but when you take Gary Sanchez 4th round in a 40-team league or something, you're saying he's one of the best 40 or 50 players in baseball. I don't think he's that hot yet. He had a hot near Rookie of the Year campaign last season, but I don't think he is that hot yet. I think he's one of the better young players. But, to call him one of the best 40 or 50 players of baseball, I'm sorry, that's not right. I'm speaking this as a Yankee fan. That's not right.
Yeah, I would hold off on the laurels. And if there's anything that the sports media likes to do, the New York sports media likes to do when they've seen a guy a young Yankee, a homegrown guy, get real hot real fast, is they start, giving up the old Laurel and Hardy handshake.
It's like that Fat Boy Slim song, I have to praise you like I should. Well, you really shouldn't.
Not to mention, do I have to mention Java Chamberlain?
Java.
Because we all remember how that happened. It started out hot, but then it disappeared in a cloud of swamp bugs.
Yep. And then he ended up moving.
Folks, I'm still infuriated.
I remember
bug spray. My hand starts shaking.
I remember young Java, and he was so cool and everything. And then he went to the Tigers and became bearded Java. And hadn't really improved from his struggles. And then didn't he break his ankle when playing with his kid on a trampoline or something like that?
Yeah, I think he's out of baseball now.
Really? Is Java really out of baseball? I'm going to be so sad if that's the truth.
It would be sad. Because I really did like him. I mean, Grizzly Adams beard or no Grizzly Adams beard.
According to Wikipedia, it hasn't said he's officially retired. Let's see. Yeah, it hasn't said he's officially retired as of yet, but
he's a quote-unquote free agent.
On January 20th, Chamberlain signed a minor league contract with the Brewers with an invite to spring training. He was released on March 22nd. He's a free agent.
And that is a damn shame.
Yeah, how the mighty fall. I mean, although technically he was a two-time World Series champion, so if he were to end his career now, he can't say a lot was lost. He's still a two-time champ.
Two-time champion?
Yeah, apparently he was with the Royals in 15.
What?
Yes. He was with the Royals in 15.
Wow, I didn't even fucking know. Did he get a ring?
He started 15 with the Tigers. He exercised and opted out part of his deal on August 14, 2015. He signed with the Royals 2 days later. And then he played, he was designated for assignment on the same day the Royals played the first game of the 2015 World Series. He would still be eligible to receive a second championship ring for playing at least a few games for the Royals in the regular season.
Oh, boy. So technically...
On a technicality, he is a two-time champion.
Which is the best kind of technicality, to be honest with you.
But pretty much.
I like Java, though. I do.
I do, too. Like I said, I remember young Java. He was so cool. I think I still have it somewhere, one of the In Java We Trust t-shirts.
Oh, God. But that's why I'm reticent. I keep using that word.
I know what you mean. I mean, we had no runs DMC last season, and then by Miller, by Chapman.
Even though Chapman came back.
Right. But still by Miller.
But still, I'm not going to all of a sudden start worshiping Gary Sanchez as a minor deity, because I know that if I start doing that,
he's cursed.
Going to run out of gas.
All right.
As it is, I did that when Michael Pineda came to the team and then started blowing people away, and then now all of a sudden I look like an idiot because he can't get anybody out.
I mean, that's the Yankees' luck. I mean, that happened with, I think it was Javier Vasquez. Everywhere else he would go, he'd be good, but then he'd come to the Yankees and he would suck.
Oh, fucking Javier Vasquez. Oh, excuse me, I just threw him on off a little bit.
All right. To get off of the Yankees and Mets for a little bit, I think from a Major League Baseball league perspective, fail of the week goes to Adam Wainwright for that horrible, horrible pitch to Yadier Molina during the second game of the 3-game set with the Cubs.
Yes, indeed. And if you haven't seen it, folks, you really need to, because I just saw it before we went on air. It is the funniest damn thing I've seen in a while. And if you didn't, he not only did not throw near him, he didn't even throw it in the same planetary orbit as his catcher.
Like I said to you, supposedly it was a communication thing where he was going to throw a fastball and Yadier thought it was going to be a curveball or something like that. But I mean, the way that Wainwright threw it, it was worse than 50 Cent's first pitch.
And that was pretty damn bad. I mean, we can expect that to be bad. We can expect opening pitches thrown by non-athletes to not be good. However, Wainwright is a World Series winner and a professional baseball pitcher. Pretty damn good with that.
And at least 50 Cent, got it in the air.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure maybe...
He spiked it like a football.
Maybe he was wall-eyed for a couple of seconds. You know how cross-eyed you go towards your nose? Wall-eyed means you go the other way. So maybe that's
right. Maybe. You're listening to the Unspoken Podcast part of the Undetermined Podcast Network. Nick, let's end today with a hot take.
Hot takes are plenty. Lay them on me, Tom.
Okay. Now, I could stand up here. I could stand up here and say, fuck Gary Bettman, and, we could call it a day. But let's talk about it for what it is. Basically, if you have not heard, if you have been living under a rock or, only care about the Olympics when they happen.
Or if you are Gary Bettman, let's say.
Well, if you're going to tune into the Olympics, I'm going to warn you ahead of time, you're not going to see any NHL players. And that is because the NHL has decided to prevent its players from going over to South Korea for the 2018 Olympic Games. And I mean, what's the NHL has cited that no talks, were beneficial, and they cited that the 3-week break they would take in the middle of the season was just a piss off. And basically they said it's not good for the game and not good for our grassroots. Meanwhile, you have players like Henrik Lundqvist. Actually, let me bring up the thing I wrote in about this issue. But basically, Henrik Lundqvist, since we're Rangers fans, we'll go for Lundqvist first. He said on Twitter that he was disappointed with the decision that the NHL has failed now to, this was a marketing opportunity, and the NHL has now passed that up. And now basically some players may not get the chance to compete in the Olympics ever again. Because some people, I think we've talked about this in the Olympics in last semester. For some athletes, you only get one shot sometimes.
Yeah, age being that they are scheduled skilled. You don't want to fuck it up.
And for some of the athletes, Anton Strawman has come out and said it's sad because Gary Bettman and the NHL owners have just crushed dreams right now. And as I said in the piece I wrote, I might be able to link it on our social media. Are we really surprised? It's Gary Bettman, a man who is seemingly out to eliminate any international appeal for hockey. He's trying to Americanize the sport. And let's talk about the NHL and the Bettman. I'm sorry, but now I know we have talked about in the World Baseball Classic how you didn't like it being in preseason because of the injury risk. And that was one of the things that Bettman has cited. But, let's face it, this is Gary Bettman, an owner who has seen 3 lockouts, one of which has canceled the entire season, and put such a dark light on hockey. Let's see. He also has tried to relocate a bunch of northern U.S. and Canadian teams to the southern U.S. He was responsible. Because of him, there's no more Hartford Whalers. They're now the Carolina Hurricanes. And then the original Winnipeg Jets moved to Arizona to be the Arizona Coyotes. And, of course, they're in turmoil and bankruptcy and all that. And then you have the Atlanta Thrashers, who went bankrupt. I'm not sure if they went bankrupt or not, but they were in such a bad situation. New owners came in, and they moved the team to Winnipeg, and now we have the modern-day Winnipeg Jets.
I've said it before.
And Minnesota North Stars are now the Dallas Stars.
I have said it before, and I will say it again. If not for Roger Goodell's stupendous fuck-ups, Gary Bettman would be the worst owner in. He definitely has the worst record, but Roger Goodell has the more public fuck-ups, so therefore the worst reputation. But Gary Bettman is no fucking slouch. In fact, I would argue that the league has actually deteriorated under his leadership.
I think for Bettman, the league has improved and the league has also deteriorated. But I think the improved part is not about Bettman. That's about the players and the style and traditions of hockey. And I think that has spread. Because when the league came back, it was like the dawning of a new day and such. And over the last few years, especially in like high school and college, I've seen hockey grow. There's more mainstream audience. I think NBC deserves some credit on that. Speaking of which, another Gary Bettman fucked up that I actually researched and figured out. He has also been a fuck up when it comes to Canadian TV and playoff hockey. Have you ever heard of the CBC, Nick?
Yes, they're the Canadian Broadcasting Company.
And you know about Hockey Night in Canada?
It's one of the biggest Canadian television shows. Hockey coverage.
Right. But in terms of like the primary TV, provider for Canadian television for the playoffs,
they're it.
He has screwed them over so many times. It's unreal. Like they're not the provider, despite having Hockey Night in Canada, a tradition for what? At least 20, 30 years, maybe even 50 years?
I don't even know. I'm not Canadian, so I wouldn't know.
So it's like, and now the league has promoted something called the World Cup of Hockey, I believe it's called. Is it the World? Yeah, the World Cup of Hockey, as an appropriate alternative. For those who don't know, the World Cup of Hockey took place in 1996 and 2004. It was held in the fall of 2016 as well, and it will now be every 4 years, maybe, just maybe, to replace, the Olympics. And it will alternate biannually. So, like, when 2018 comes, there will be a spin-off that'll see a game between the European All-Star team and a North American All-Star team, and all of this would take place in the preseason. So 2016 preseason, we had World Cup of Hockey. 2018 season will be that All-Star game in the preseason. 2020 World Cup of Hockey preseason. And I think the World Cup of Hockey is great in its own right. And I said this in the piece. To call it an alternate to the Winter Olympics is a fucking joke. Do you know the teams involved in the World Cup of Hockey, Nick?
Enlighten me.
Okay. You have... Let's see. Actually, let me bring that up right here. World Cup of Hockey. Okay, you have the United States. These are the teams in the 2016 tournament, by the way, so I don't know if these are going to change. You have the United States, and you have Canada. You have the Czech Republic. You have Finland, Russia, Sweden. And then they decide to stick a bunch of teams from players from other European nations not already represented, including Austria, France, Germany, Denmark, Norway, Slovakia, Slovenia, and Switzerland, and they are under a moniker of Team Europe. And then they take, for the United States and Canadian teams, you can only be 24 and over. If you are 23 and under, you are placed on a combined team called Team North America that is made up of U.S. and Canadian players that are 23 and under.
What the fuck?
So, like I said, it's a great tournament in its own right. To call it, an alternate to the Olympics, quote-unquote, the best international competition there is, that's a fucking joke.
You know what? I got nothing. I honestly got nothing. Because I can't even begin to start to pick that apart.
I mean, here's the thing. I know we have discussed, a couple weeks ago, we discussed the World Baseball Classic and, preseason with injuries and such. Well, number one, this wouldn't help because this is technically preseason. So it's like you're just taking the move of risk of injury from mid-season to preseason. You're doing nothing there. Number two, what's it called? Even then, the World Baseball Classic, it's a big thing with MLB and such. It essentially was made in response to something the IOC did, to the removal of baseball. You had the MLB working with the IBF and WBSC. If they wanted to change the date, like we talked about with that hot take, you can't necessarily move the Olympics. Or can you? Nick, I found out that in 1956, the Olympics was held in Melbourne, Australia. But the equestrian events for the Winter Olympics were held in June in Stockholm, Sweden. You want to know why?
Horseshit problems? I don't know.
Because Australia's laws were too strict on the entry of foreign horses. In 1956, I guess foreign horses were such a problem for Australia.
I guess so. I can't even think of anything funny to say that. Maybe they just didn't want to have to look at accidental horse erections. I don't know.
But I mean, the hockey, even then, the Olympics wouldn't do that because hockey is probably their most watched sport of the Winter Olympics. I mean, 15 million Canadians tuned in last Olympics to watch their team win the gold medal. 15 million.
So I guess Bettman's taking a line from South Park and basically going, fuck Canada.
Maybe. I mean, I guess now the Team USA will just have to be, college players and that's such. And I mean, it works in some ways and it doesn't, because in the last Olympics to have baseball, the 2008 Olympics, competing in the Olympics, let's see, I found Hyunjin Ryu, Seung-Won Ho, I found Dexter Fowler, Jason Nix, Jake Arrieta, and Steven Strasburg. So, I mean, you have the ability to see all the young talent that could make it to the bigs one day. And we could get another Miracle on Ice. I don't know, man. But, I mean, at the end of the day, I get all the stuff that the NHL is trying to say, like with the injuries and such, the same things you argue about with the World Baseball Classic. But honestly, fuck Gary Bettman, because Gary Bettman has just screwed up so many times that it's like something, protected for the league is now just, it's terrible. It's fucking terrible. And he has robbed young players of their dream. Some of them probably dreamed of being in the Olympics, and now he's taken that away.
You can say it until your face turns blue, and you're going to probably have to. Because I get the feeling this is only going to be the beginning.
Oh, my God. But like I said, who knows? Maybe we'll get another Miracle on Ice on this. I mean, that's the only hope at this point.
Yeah, but that's the best we can hope for.
And that's going to do it for episode number 15 of the Unspoken Podcast. And Nick, what do you think about today? I mean, I'm sorry to end on that sour note, but I mean, still, fuck Gary Bettman.
It needs to be said, so therefore you will be the one to climb up on the soapbox and say it.
Oh, and in case you're wondering, in the link, the Flocky piece where I wrote it for, there's a poll there, and it's called, is Gary Bettman bad for the NHL? And your possible choices are yes, yeah, yup, and sure. If you want to argue with me and say how he's not bad for the NHL, I'm sorry, fuck you.
Yeah, you pretty much have to.
Once again, that's going to do it for this edition of the Unspoken Podcast. Episode 15 is now in the books. Go like us on Facebook and Twitter at the UDUP. Like and listen into all the different pages for the Undetermined Network's podcasts, including Unknown and Uncloned and us. And yeah, that's going to do it. I'm Tom Albano from Nick Federa. We're going to see you next week on episode 16 of the Unspoken Podcast.
Good night, everybody.
See you around, everybody.